You were mid-sentence. Something real was coming through. Not a rehearsed thought. Not something you read somewhere. Something that had been living inside you for a long time, finally moving toward the surface. Your mouth was already open. The words were right there. And then, gone. Not faded. Not blurry. Gone. Clean. Like a hand reached in and simply removed it. You blink. You say, wait, I just had it. And even as those words leave your mouth, you already know. It's over. And what sits in its place is this hollow silence where something profound used to be. That moment has a name. Mary Magdalene named it, not as poetry, not as metaphor. As a precise, operating mechanism she understood in extraordinary detail, one she taught about specifically, carefully, and designed counter-practices for. And the beings responsible for that erasure, the ones who move into the gap between your highest knowing and your ability to express it, she named them too. The Archons. Stay with that word for a second, because this isn't mythology. This isn't something that lives only in ancient texts. This is a functional description of something that has been happening to you, repeatedly, specifically, in the moments that matter most. Think about when the forgetting hits hardest. Not when you're reaching for someone's name at a party. The forgetting that carries weight, that leaves a hollow feeling in the chest. It comes during conversations about what genuinely matters. Mid-meditation, when something finally opens and you reach to hold it and it's gone. With someone you love, when the truth you've been carrying for months is right there, forming, and then you say something else entirely instead. That pattern is not random. It is not stress. It is not brain fog. It is targeted interference. Targeted at the kind of person you are, at the frequency you carry, at the precise moments when your transmission would matter most if it completed. Mary Magdalene, the one the earliest esoteric traditions called the Apostle of Apostles, the woman who understood the inner teaching when everyone else was still processing the outer form. She spent a significant part of her life teaching people exactly this. How the interference works, why it targets specific people, and what to do about it. This is not a beginner video. I'm not here to convince you that reality is larger than what you can see. You already know that. What I'm here to do is give you the ancient, precise understanding for something you've been living inside without a name. Because the most dangerous thing about this interference isn't the forgetting itself. It's what the forgetting makes you conclude about yourself. That you're scattered. That you can't hold the high truths you feel. That you are the problem. That conclusion is the interference's greatest victory. Mary Magdalene's teaching is the direct answer to it. The sentence you keep losing? It's still there. Picture her for a moment. Not the version that was handed to you in Sunday school, not the weeping figure at the feet of someone else's story. Picture a woman sitting slightly apart from a group. Not because she's been excluded, because she chooses it. There is something in her posture that is completely still, not the stillness of someone waiting, but the stillness of someone who already knows. People glance at her. Some of them are uncomfortable. Not because she's done anything wrong, because she holds something they can't quite name, and things they can't name make people nervous. She is not performing devotion. She is not trying to belong to the room. She is the room, in a sense, the room's deepest frequency, just sitting there breathing. This is who Mary Magdalene was. I want to be clear about something here, because this matters for everything that follows. In the earliest layers of esoteric tradition, the traditions that predate the centuries of political editing, the ones that were hidden in desert caves and passed mouth to ear in small rooms, Mary Magdalene was not a footnote. She was a central figure, not because of who she stood next to, but because of what she understood. She was called the woman who knew the all in some of the most ancient circles. She was identified as the one who received the deeper teaching, the inner meaning behind the outer form. The title Apostle of Apostles, which was used by early theologian Hippolytus of Rome, a man who lived in the 2nd and 3rd centuries and had no particular reason to elevate a woman. That title acknowledged something real. It acknowledged that she was the first to carry the risen transmission. She was first not just in time, but in understanding. While others were confused, she held clarity. While others needed explanation, she already knew. Now, what does this have to do with you forgetting mid-sentence? Everything. Because Mary Magdalene's deepest teachings were not about devotion in the way most people understand it. They were about gnosis, a word that gets thrown around a lot in spiritual circles. But what it actually means is direct, experiential knowing. Not believing something because someone told you. Not accepting a doctrine because it's tradition. But knowing something because it arrived in you directly, clean, unmediated, undeniable. And her central concern, the thing she returned to again and again in her teaching, was this: there are forces that do not want that knowing to move freely. There are mechanisms, she called them by different names in different contexts, that specifically target the transmission of inner truth. That intercept it, that dissolve it, that replace it with noise. She taught her students to recognize these mechanisms, not to fear them, not to worship them or grant them more power than they deserved, but to see them clearly, because you cannot navigate something you refuse to look at. In the esoteric tradition that Mary Magdalene was connected to, the divine creative force, called Sophia, meaning wisdom, often understood as the feminine intelligence of the cosmos, was understood to be constantly trying to reach her creation, constantly sending truth downward, inward, through the layers. And there were administrators between that truth and its destination who were invested in the transmission not arriving. Mary Magdalene's teaching was the map through those administrators, and that map starts with a name. Imagine a library, not a small library, an enormous one, vaulted ceilings, endless shelves, and you know something is in here. You came here specifically for it. You can almost feel which section it's in. You move through the stacks with purpose, and your hand reaches toward a spine, and it slides. Just slightly. Just enough that your fingers close on empty air. You try again. Same thing. You try a different shelf, a different angle, and every time, just out of reach. The book is there. You know it's there. But something in the architecture of this place is designed to keep you always reaching, never holding. That is what an archon does. The word archon comes from Greek. It means ruler or authority. In the cosmological understanding that Mary Magdalene's tradition was working within, archons were not demons with wings and fire. That's not what they were. They were far more unsettling than that, actually. They were administrators. They were the bureaucracy of limitation, the managers of the veil between higher knowing and ordinary consciousness. Think of them not as evil in the theatrical sense, but as a system whose function, whose entire operating logic, is to maintain a specific kind of forgetting in beings who carry divine spark. Because beings who carry divine spark, and who remember what they carry, are ungovernable. They cannot be managed by fear. They cannot be controlled by distraction. They become transparent to the systems that depend on unconsciousness. And that is a problem. For the system. Mary Magdalene named them because she understood something that I personally believe is one of the most suppressed teachings in all of spiritual history. Not because it's dark or dangerous, but because it is empowering in a way that very few teachings are. She understood that you cannot dissolve what you have not identified. You cannot move through a maze if you believe the maze is your natural habitat. The naming is the first act of liberation. In her tradition, these archons were understood to operate at specific frequencies. The frequencies of interruption, distraction, substitution, and erasure. They don't announce themselves. They don't show up with horns and a pitchfork, so you can see them coming. They slip into the gap between your highest knowing and your conscious expression of that knowing. They live in the delay. They live in the half-second between the truth forming and the truth arriving at your lips. And here's what makes this so hard to detect. The interference feels like you. It feels like your own mind wandering. It feels like your own uncertainty. It presents itself as self-doubt, as distraction, as I lost my train of thought. It mimics the natural operations of a human mind having a normal, forgetful moment. That's the sophistication of it. That's why Mary Magdalene's teaching on discernment was so radical. She was asking her students to develop an awareness so fine that they could feel the difference between their own natural mental drift and something that had moved in from outside. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm not asking you to become paranoid. I'm not suggesting that every forgotten grocery list is a spiritual attack. That's not what this is. The archonic interference that Mary Magdalene described is specific. It has a signature, and the signature is this. It arrives precisely when the stakes are highest. Precisely when the truth you're holding would, if delivered, change something. Not in the middle of small talk. Not when you're trying to remember someone's phone number. In the sacred moments. In the transmission moments. In the moments when you, specifically, are about to say something that your soul has been trying to say for a very long time. That specificity is the fingerprint. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You're meditating. Something opens. It doesn't happen every time. Most sessions are ordinary, settling, gentle. But this time, something opens. A clarity arrives that feels like waking up inside a waking state. There's information in it. Not vague impressions, but structured understanding, the kind that connects things you've been wondering about for months, maybe years. You can feel it arranging itself. You're watching it from the inside. It's beautiful. It's exactly what you needed. You reach for your phone to record it. The screen takes a moment to unlock. The voice memo app opens. You press record. You bring the phone to your mouth. And you say, "So what I was just getting was..." And it's gone. Not dimmed. Not hard to put into words. Gone. Like a clean erasure. Like the channel closed the moment you tried to document it. You sit there with the phone at your mouth and the silence and the low, familiar grief of it. This is not rare for people like you. This is a pattern. And Mary Magdalene's teaching goes directly into why. Here's the mechanism, as she understood it, and as I'm going to translate it into language that lands today. Your higher self, the part of you that exists at a frequency above ordinary time and ordinary thought, is constantly transmitting. It doesn't stop. It's like a radio signal that's always broadcasting. The question is never whether the signal is there. The question is whether the receiver is clear enough to pick it up, and whether the transmission can survive the journey from the level where it originates to the level where you can speak it, write it, act on it. That journey has layers. In the cosmology that Mary Magdalene worked within, influenced by the Sophianic tradition, the understanding of Sophia as the cosmic intelligence embedded in matter, truth moves through a series of planes before it becomes expressible on the physical level. And at each plane, there is the possibility of interference. Think of it like a relay system. The original signal is clean and complete, but by the time it passes through multiple relay stations, each one with its own noise, its own static, its own agenda, what arrives at the final station can be a fragment, or nothing. The Archons, in this understanding, operate at those relay stations. Not at the source, they cannot touch the source. The source, the original transmission from the higher self, or from what Mary Magdalene's tradition called the divine light, is beyond their reach. But the passage of that transmission through the layers of consciousness, that is where the interference lives. Now, there is another tradition that said almost the same thing, using completely different imagery. In the ancient Greek understanding, there was a river called the Lethe, the river of forgetting, that souls were said to pass through when entering physical incarnation. The Lethe was not punishment. It was supposedly a mercy. You forget the full weight of what you are so you can function in the density of a body. But here's what's interesting. In several mystery schools of the ancient world, including the Orphic tradition, initiates were specifically taught not to drink from the Lethe. They were taught to remember. They were given the tools of recollection, not academic memory, but soul memory, the knowing of what you are. Mary Magdalene's teaching is doing the same thing. Different river, same instruction. Don't forget. And when the forgetting is imposed, recognize it as imposed, not natural. The pattern of when this happens is extremely consistent. And I want you to actually map this against your own experience right now. The wipe happens most frequently during conversations about awakening, specifically when you're the one doing the transmitting, not just listening. It happens during creative flow states, that moment when a painting or a piece of writing or a song is coming through you rather than from you, and then something cuts the thread. It happens during prayer and meditation, specifically at the point of opening, not during the settling phase, but at the precise moment the channel widens. And it happens during emotional truth-telling, when you are trying to express something real and vulnerable to someone who matters. Do you see the pattern? It's not random moments. It's transmission moments. It's every moment where you are functioning as a conduit for something higher than ordinary information. And there is one more piece to this that Mary Magdalene specifically named, and it is perhaps the most disorienting part of all. She spoke of the counterfeit spirit, not just as a general concept, but as something precise, a frequency that mimics the voice of your own inner knowing, that whispers in your own register, that feels from the inside like your own intuition. But instead of leading you toward truth, it leads you toward silence, toward deflection, toward saying something easier, something safer, something that will not disrupt the room or the relationship or the acceptable version of who you are. The wipe is the blunt instrument. The counterfeit spirit is the subtle one. And between the two of them, enormous amounts of divine transmission have been intercepted. But here's what Mary Magdalene's teaching rests on, and this is the load-bearing wall of everything she understood. They can interfere with the passage of the truth. They cannot destroy the truth itself. The signal keeps transmitting. The higher self does not give up. It circles back. It tries again. It finds another moment, another conversation, another opening. The truth you keep forgetting is still there. It never left. Let's stay with you for a minute. Not the general you. You specifically. The person watching this right now. You've always known things a little before they happened. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way. Not visions and lightning bolts. Just a quiet, ahead-of-the-curve awareness. Someone would call, and you'd already be thinking about them. A situation would develop in a direction everyone else was surprised by, and you'd already been living with that outcome in your gut for days. You'd walk into a room and immediately read the emotional temperature with a precision that took other people weeks of knowing someone to develop. You've been the person people come to. Sometimes when they have no idea why they're coming to you. They'll say, "I just felt like I needed to talk to you." And you hold their truth with them, and you help them see something, and they leave lighter. And sometimes you look at them leaving and think, who does this for me? Who holds this for me? You've always felt, underneath everything, that you are here to do something specific. Not vague, make a difference energy. Something specific, even if you can't always articulate what it is. There's a mission sense that has followed you since you were young. And with it, the frustration of not being able to fully express it, of having it arrive in pieces, in fragments, in the gaps of sentences that keep getting cut short. The forgetting is not random for you. I need you to really hear this. In the esoteric tradition that Mary Magdalene was working within, certain beings in incarnation carry what was called the pneuma, the divine spark. This is not a flattering label designed to make someone feel special. It's a functional description. Pneumatics, as they were called, are those whose consciousness has a natural resonance with higher frequency truth. They don't have to work hard to access it. It's more like they have to work hard to stay anchored in ordinary reality, because the higher frequency keeps pulling at them. And here is what makes this directly relevant to the forgetting. When a being carries this frequency, when the pneuma is active in someone, they generate what Mary Magdalene's tradition would describe as a kind of light signature. Not literally visible light, though some people who are sensitive to energy do perceive it. A frequency. And that frequency, by its very existence, is a disruption to the archonic system. It doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to protest or resist or fight. Just being what it is creates friction in the field of administered limitation. This is why the interference is targeted. This is why it isn't happening to everyone equally. You might have noticed this. The person sitting next to you in a meeting loses their train of thought, and it doesn't mean anything. They were thinking about lunch. But when you lose your train of thought, there's a specific feeling attached to it. A lost feeling, because something real was moving. Mary Magdalene taught that the intensity of the interference is proportional to the brightness of the transmission being attempted. The clearer the truth, the stronger the wipe. The more significant the moment, the more precise the interference. This is actually, if you think about it, a form of confirmation. The moments where you feel most profoundly erased are the moments where you were closest to saying something that would genuinely matter. The interference, in its intensity, is pointing to where the treasure is. What I find most profound about Mary Magdalene's entire approach to this, and I mean this personally, this is not just a talking point, is that she never told her students to fight. She never framed this as a battle to be won through force or will or spiritual aggression. She told them to remember, because remembering, she understood, is the resistance. The act of returning to what you know, even when something has moved in to erase it, is not passive. It is the most direct and powerful act available to a pneumatic being. You don't defeat the Archons by confronting them. You make them irrelevant by holding the thread. And that thread, the one they keep trying to cut, is your truest knowing about who you are. Let's talk about the most insidious version of the interference. Because the wipe is the one you can see. What comes next is the one that most people never catch. You're having dinner with someone you love. The conversation is real, not surface-level filling of silence, but actually real. And something has been building for weeks. A truth about how you feel, about what you need, about what you've been sensing in the relationship, or in yourself, or about the direction everything is moving. The moment arrives. You feel it, that specific opening like a door swinging inward. Everything in you gathers. Your breath actually changes. And then you hear yourself say, "Did you see what happened in the news today?" And the moment closes. And the conversation becomes something else. And the truth that was right there, stays unspoken. And you don't even fully register that anything happened because the transition was so smooth, so natural, because it sounded like you. It came in your own voice, in your own register, with your own habitual way of moving the conversation when things get too real. This is the counterfeit spirit, and Mary Magdalene's teaching on discernment, real discernment, not just trust your gut bumper sticker discernment, was specifically designed to help people recognize this. The wipe, the heart erasure we talked about earlier, is jarring. You notice it. You say, wait, I just had something. There's a moment of conscious loss. But the redirect, the counterfeit voice, is smooth. That's what makes it so much more effective. It doesn't take the truth away. It offers you an alternative in the same breath. It gives you something to say instead, something comfortable, something that keeps the peace or keeps the image or keeps you safe from the vulnerability of actual transmission. The counterfeit spirit, in Mary Magdalene's understanding, does not scream. It does not announce itself with darkness or dread. It whispers in your own frequency. It has studied you. It knows your patterns, your escape routes, your habitual deflections, the specific kinds of safety you reach for when the real thing gets too close. And it uses all of that against you, wearing your own face. Now here is how you begin to tell the difference, because this is actually teachable, and Mary Magdalene taught it. A genuine intuitive redirect. When your higher self is actually steering you away from a moment, because the timing isn't right or the person isn't safe for that truth, has a quality of stillness to it. It doesn't arrive in a rush. It doesn't come with the slight electric relief of having escaped something. It comes with clarity, sometimes even with a gentle sense of not here, not now, but the truth is still held. The counterfeit redirect feels like relief, but it's relief with an aftertaste. A mild hollowness, a subtle background frustration that you might not identify until hours later, when you're lying in bed and the actual truth surfaces and you think, I should have said that. I had the chance and I didn't say it. That aftertaste is the body telling you that you were redirected. And I want to ask you something directly. Think back, not far, maybe just the last few weeks. Was there a conversation where you were about to say something real and then you didn't? Where the words formed and then you chose something easier? And afterward, even slightly, even briefly, did you notice that hollow feeling? Because if you did, that is not guilt. That is not self-criticism. That is your nervous system reporting accurately on what happened. You were redirected, and you can learn to catch it before it completes. After the words are gone, something remains. The thought dissolves. The sentence unravels. The specific formulation that felt so clear and so right is already unreachable. But your chest is still tight. Your hands are still slightly unsteady. There's a weight behind your sternum that doesn't match the ordinary moment you find yourself in. Your body is still holding the frequency of what your mind just lost. This has happened to you. I'm almost certain of it. You forget the content, but you cannot shake the feeling. You can't tell anyone what you were going to say, but your body is still responding to it, still moved by it, still trembling slightly at the edges of it. And if someone asks you what's wrong, you say nothing, I forgot what I was going to say. But nothing is not what you mean. Nothing is just the only word available when the actual content has been erased. Here is one of the most beautiful and practically powerful dimensions of Mary Magdalene's teaching. She understood the body not as a container for the soul, but as an archive. Not a lesser version of higher knowing, but a specific and irreplaceable form of it. She was deeply embedded in a tradition that took embodiment seriously as a spiritual act. While other esoteric teachings of her era tended to dismiss the body as something to transcend, to move past, to overcome, Mary Magdalene's approach was different. Profoundly different. She taught that the divine speaks through the body when the mind is being blocked. That there is a form of knowing that lives in the physical, in the gut, in the chest, in the hands, in the breath, that does not travel through the same relay stations that the Archons inhabit. This is what I'd call somatic gnosis. Gnosis, again, that word for direct knowing, that is held in the body rather than the intellect. And it operates under a different set of rules. The archonic interference that wipes the mind cannot reach the body's knowing in the same way. The body stores the feeling of the truth even when the words are gone. And the body's record is the thread back. Think about what this means practically. When you're in a meditation and the transmission gets erased, before you open your eyes, before you reach for the phone, before you try to translate it into language, stay in the body first. Where do you feel it? The chest? The solar plexus? The back of the skull? Stay there. Don't rush to the words. The body is holding the shape of the transmission, even after the content has been wiped. And if you anchor to the shape first, the content often follows. Not always, but more often than if you try to chase the mental version directly. When you're in a conversation and you feel the wipe happen, you lose the thread and the familiar helpless, I just had it sensation arrives. Don't apologize for the pause. Don't fill the space with something easier. Drop into the body. Feel where the truth was just sitting. Your chest knows. Your solar plexus knows. Stay there for one breath, just one, and the feeling of what you were about to say becomes available again, even if the exact words are different. The body is your backup system, and the Archons, for all their sophistication, did not entirely account for it. Mary Magdalene knew this. It's why so much of her teaching was rooted in presence, in breath, in touch, in the radical act of being fully in your body, even when the systems around you prefer you dissociated and ungrounded. Being fully embodied is a spiritual act. Being rooted in the felt sense of your own knowing is resistance. Your body is not your limitation. Your body is your archive, and it has been faithfully recording everything they tried to erase. You've been carrying something for months. You know exactly what it is. You've rehearsed it in the shower, turned it over in the car, articulated it to yourself in the quiet before sleep with total clarity. You've said it to yourself 100 times with exactly the right words. When you're alone with it, it's clean. It's true. It's complete. And then you sit across from the person who needs to hear it. The moment is here. The opening is here. You've even said, "There's something I've been wanting to tell you," which means you have explicitly announced that you are about to transmit something real. The whole room, just the two of you in it, is tilted toward this moment. And you say, "I've just been a little tired lately. Work stuff." You know. And the moment passes. And you drive home alone with the truth still inside you, fully intact, fully unexpressed, unchanged by the conversation that was supposed to carry it. And the hollow feeling is enormous. Not because the relationship is bad, not because you don't trust the person, but because once again, the most important thing could not get through. Intimate relationships are the highest interference zones, and Mary Magdalene's teaching is very clear about why. Relationships, real ones, soul-level ones, the kind where two people are actually trying to see each other, are sites of sacred transmission. When they're functioning at their highest potential, a relationship is a space where two people continuously transmit truth to each other. Not just feelings, not just logistics, but soul-level transmission. The kind of knowing of another that cannot be achieved through information exchange alone. It requires the actual movement of truth, person to person, without obstruction, which means it is, by definition, a high-target zone. In the esoteric tradition that shaped Mary Magdalene's understanding, Yeshua, the teacher she was most deeply connected to, their relationship was described in these early traditions not primarily in romantic terms, but in terms of transmission. He told her what he told no one else. She understood what others could not. They held each other's highest frequency and reflected it back without distortion. That was the template, not sentimentality, not performance of love, but the radical act of being a clean mirror for another person's divine truth. That kind of relationship is the archonic system's least preferred outcome, because two people in genuine, unobstructed soul transmission are practically impossible to manage. They support each other's remembering. They catch each other's forgetting. They become a kind of living archive for each other's highest knowing. So the interference at the intimate level is the most targeted of all. And here is my genuine opinion on this, something I feel strongly about. I believe that the reason so many sacred relationships fall apart is not primarily because people stopped caring about each other. It's because they couldn't get the truth through. Not the hard truths of conflict, though those too, but the tender truths. The "I see something in you that I don't think you see in yourself" truths. The "what you did last Tuesday shifted something in me forever" truths. The "I love you in a way that I don't have words for, and every time I try to say it something cuts the sentence short" truths. The interference one. And two people who were supposed to transmit to each other ended up transmitting past each other, in the same room, for years, until the loneliness of undelivered truth became unbearable. Mary Magdalene's teaching for relationships was about creating what she would have understood as a clean field, a space between two people where the usual noise, the performing, the protecting, the managing of each other's reactions, is deliberately set aside, even just for a window of time, where both people have agreed, even implicitly, that truth can move here without being caught and redirected. You cannot force this field into being, but you can create the conditions for it. Slowing down, getting off screens, sitting in a quiet that isn't being filled, making contact, real contact, eye contact or hand contact, before you try to say the hard, true thing. These are not just communication tips. They are frequency adjustments. They are the act of making the transmission channel clear enough that what needs to come through actually can. Because the person across from you is also waiting for something true, and they also keep losing the thread. Picture a small room, stone walls, an oil lamp burning low, throwing soft, uneven light across the faces of maybe 8 or 10 people sitting in a circle on the floor. No desks, no hierarchy of seating, no performance of attention, no one trying to look more devoted or more awakened than the person next to them. Just people who have come because they carry something they don't fully understand yet, and they need a space where that something can finally breathe. And Mary Magdalene sitting among them, not elevated above them, not set apart on a platform with the visual language of authority, sitting among them at the same level, in the same circle, as if the teaching is not descending from somewhere above but rising from somewhere within the room itself, from the center of the circle, from the shared breath, from the quiet that they've all agreed to enter together. Her voice does not rise with ego. It does not fall with uncertainty. It just flows, even, clear, unhurried in a way that feels almost radical, because the world outside this room moves fast and loud and always wants something from you. But in here, her voice creates a different kind of time, a slower time, the kind where things that have been pressed down can finally surface. Your nervous system would slow down in that room, not because she commanded it to, because it recognized something in her frequency, the way a tuning fork causes another tuning fork across the room to vibrate simply by being struck. She is struck, and something in everyone listening begins to resonate. She is not lecturing. This is important, because there is a world of difference between lecturing and teaching, and Mary Magdalene understood that difference in her bones. Lecturing moves in one direction, from the one who knows toward the ones who don't. It assumes a gap. It fills the gap with information, and calls that transmission. But what Mary Magdalene was doing in that room was something else entirely. She was teaching people how to hold a thread, how to stay connected to what they already carried, the deep knowing, the pneumatic spark, under the specific, targeted pressure that was waiting for them the moment they stepped back outside. Because she knew what was coming. She had watched it happen too many times. She had watched students leave this circle full of clarity, full of the kind of knowing that feels unshakable when it's present, and then come back the next time hollow-eyed and frustrated. "I lost it," they would tell her. "I had it here and then I was out there and it was gone." She didn't dismiss this. She didn't tell them to pray harder or believe more. She looked at the mechanism clearly, and she designed precise counter-movements. This is what she taught them. The first teaching, silence before speech. Not the silence of not knowing what to say. Not the uncomfortable silence of a conversation that has run dry. Sacred silence. Deliberate silence. The specific act of arriving fully, in the body, in the breath, in the present moment, before opening the mouth to say anything that matters. Mary Magdalene taught her students that the 2 or 3 breaths before you speak are not empty time. They are not a gap to be filled or a pause to be apologized for. They are the preparation of the channel. They are the difference between speaking from the surface and speaking from the depth. Think about how you normally speak, especially in conversations that carry weight. The words start before you fully arrived in the moment. You're still processing the last thing that was said, still managing how you're being perceived, still running the background calculation of what's safe and what isn't. And the words are already coming out. They come from the top layer, the defended layer, the layer that is optimized for social navigation rather than truth transmission. Mary Magdalene reversed this entirely. She taught that silence is not the absence of the teaching. Silence is the teaching in its first form. When you pause before you speak, when you genuinely land in your body, feel the floor under you, feel the breath move through you, and then open your mouth, what comes out is different in quality, different in frequency. It carries more of the original signal because it traveled through a cleaner channel. The world has trained you to fill silence instantly. Silence in a conversation feels like failure, like something broke, like you owe the other person words to rescue the moment from its own emptiness. But Mary Magdalene taught that this training is exactly what the interference depends on. Because if you can be rushed, if you can be pressured into speaking before you've arrived, then what comes out is already compromised, already a fraction of what it could have been. The sacred pause is the first act of resistance. Practice it, not eventually, this week. In your next important conversation, the next time something real needs to be said, give yourself the 2 breaths before you speak. Let the silence be there. Let it be uncomfortable if it needs to be. Stay in it, and then speak from what rises in the stillness, not from the reflex to fill the space. The second teaching, Breathe through the solar plexus, not the chest. This one is so specific, so anatomically precise, that it tells you everything about the level at which Mary Magdalene was working. This is not general spiritual advice. This is a targeted intervention in the body's own architecture of knowing. Chest breathing, the shallow, upper body breath that most people default to, especially under stress, keeps consciousness hovering near the surface. It is the breath of vigilance, of performance, of the part of you that is managing the external world. And when you are chest breathing, you are operating from the defended upper layer, the layer closest to the interference, the layer most easily redirected. The solar plexus is different. It sits in the upper abdomen, the center of the body, the place that traditions across the world have identified as the seat of personal power, of gut knowing, of the second intelligence that lives below the rational mind. Modern neuroscience has now confirmed what Mary Magdalene's tradition already knew. The enteric nervous system, the complex web of neurons lining the gut, contains roughly 500 million nerve cells. More than the spinal cord, it processes information independently. It knows things before the brain has finished analyzing them. When you breathe into that center, slow, deliberate, dropping your breath past the chest and into the belly, you shift the seat of your consciousness downward. You drop below the layer of the interference. You access the body's own knowing directly. And what you speak from that place carries the body's truth, not just the mind's approximation of it. Mary Magdalene taught this as a practical preparation. Before you enter a conversation that matters, breathe into the belly. Before you sit down to write or create or pray, 3 slow breaths into the solar plexus. Feel your center of gravity drop. Feel the difference between speaking from up here, in the throat and the defended chest, versus speaking from down there, from the gut center that the interference has less access to. The words that come from the solar plexus feel different. They sound different. They carry weight that chest-breathing words don't carry. Not because of volume or force, often they're quieter, but they land differently. They move something in the person receiving them, because they came from somewhere real. The third teaching, the practice of the returning word. This is the one I find most extraordinary, and it is the most directly useful for what we've been exploring throughout this entire video. The wipe, the mid-sentence erasure, the transmission that gets cut at the exact moment it was about to land. When the words leave, when the wipe happens and the thought is gone, what do? The instinct is to chase it, to frantically search backward through the last few seconds, replaying the mental tape, trying to recover the specific sentence that was forming. You concentrate harder. You say, wait, I just had it, and try to hold the last trace of it before it fully dissolves. Sometimes you manage to grab a fragment. More often, the harder you chase it, the further it goes. Mary Magdalene understood why. Chasing is a mental act. It operates at the same layer, the cognitive, language processing layer, where the interference did its work. You are, in effect, returning to the crime scene and asking the person who took the thing to help you find it. It doesn't work because you're playing on the interference's field, using the interference's tools. Her teaching was completely different. Don't chase the thought. Return to the feeling that birthed the thought. Not the thought itself. Not the words, not the specific formulation, not the sentence structure that was forming. The feeling underneath all of that, the emotional truth, the body sensation, the specific quality of what was moving in you, in your chest, your gut, your throat, in the moment just before the words arrived. Go back to that place. Anchor to the feeling, not the content. Stay there for one breath. Feel what was present in you when the knowing was clear. And then let the words reassemble from that feeling upward, from the felt truth back into language, rather than trying to reconstruct the language directly. What arrives this way is often not the same words. The phrasing is different. It's sometimes simpler, sometimes less polished, sometimes more raw and exposed than the version that got wiped. But it carries the original frequency because it came from the original source, the felt truth in the body, which the interference could not reach. The content changed. The essence didn't. This is not a memory technique. It is a different pathway through the interference entirely. It bypasses the relay station where the wipe occurred. It goes back behind the erasure to something that was never touched. Practice this. The next time you lose a thought mid-sentence, stop. Don't apologize. Don't rush. Put one hand on your chest or your belly. Feel what's there. What emotion, what sensation, what quality of knowing is still present in your body even though the words are gone. Anchor to that. Breathe once. And then speak from it. Even if what comes out is different, even if it's less formed than what you lost. It will carry what mattered. It always does. The fourth teaching, the value of spoken fragments. This might be the most countercultural thing Mary Magdalene taught, because it requires giving up something most of us grip very tightly, the need to have it fully together before we open our mouths. She told her students this directly: even incomplete truth, when voiced, disrupts the interference. Read that again. Even incomplete truth, when voiced, disrupts the interference. The archonic suppression system is not designed to handle partial arrival. Its function is to prevent transmission, not to handle transmission that comes through sideways, in pieces, broken at the edges but still carrying the frequency at the center. When even a fragment of the truth makes it into the room, when you say, "I don't have the words for this, but I know something real is here," or "I keep losing this thought, and I'm going to say it anyway even if it comes out wrong," you have partially completed the transmission. You have put the frequency out there. You have marked the territory. And that marking matters, because it tells the field, and it tells the person you're talking to, that something true is present, even if it hasn't fully arrived yet. It creates a space into which more of the truth can follow. It cracks the door open. And once the door is cracked, the pressure on the other side often pushes it wider. You do not have to wait until you have the whole beautiful, articulate, complete version. Say the fragment. Say the broken version. Say the, "I'm trying to say something that keeps slipping away from me, but here's the edge of it." That is not weakness. That is not lack of preparation. That is the bravest kind of transmission, the kind that moves even under fire, even in pieces, even when the interference is doing its best to stop it. Mary Magdalene taught this in a room where people were afraid. Afraid of being wrong, of sounding foolish, of transmitting something incomplete, and being judged for the incompleteness rather than honored for the attempt. She dismantled that fear systematically. She created a culture in that circle where the fragment was sacred, where the broken sentence was celebrated rather than apologized for, because she understood that the fragment that gets voiced is always more valuable than the perfect transmission that never left the mouth. Bring these four teachings together and something shifts. The sacred pause, the solar plexus breath, the returning word, the spoken fragment. These are not spiritual concepts to admire from a distance. They are practical, specific, body-level interventions in the exact mechanism that has been cutting your transmissions short. Mary Magdalene designed them with precision, not for a general audience, not for people casually interested in spiritual development, but for people like you, people who carry something real, people whose transmissions are being specifically targeted because of what they carry. Before your next important conversation, pause. Breathe into your belly. Make contact with your own body. And when the wipe comes, and it may come, don't chase it. Return to the feeling. Speak the fragment. These are not tricks. This is the ancient map, and it was preserved for exactly this moment, when you are ready to stop losing the thread and start holding it. I want to ask you something that might stop you cold. Think about all the times you've lost the thread, all the forgotten mid-sentences, the erased meditations, the thoughts that vanished at the exact wrong moment. And now ask yourself honestly, were they random? Or was there a pattern to what they were about? Take a moment. Actually sit with this. Because I think if you do, if you really trace back across the moments of sharpest forgetting, you'll find that they cluster. They are not scattered evenly across all topics and all kinds of thinking. They happen most acutely when you're close to something specific. A specific understanding about yourself. A specific knowing about your origin or your purpose. A specific recognition that, if it completed, would reorganize the way you see your entire life. The thing you keep forgetting is probably the same thing. Approaching from different angles, trying on different sentences, arriving in different moments, but always circling the same territory. This is not random forgetting. This is a blocked soul memory. And Mary Magdalene's teaching on this is, in my genuine view, the most profound and most deliberately obscured dimension of her entire body of wisdom. She understood that the pneumatic being, the carrier of divine spark, comes into incarnation with specific knowing already embedded, not learned through this life's experience, but carried. A pre-existing library. And part of that library is directly relevant to why this specific soul is here in this specific form in this specific time. It's the mission-encoded memory, the soul's operating instructions, and the interference doesn't work at random. The Archons, as she understood them, are not generically opposed to all thought. They are specifically opposed to the remembering of purpose. Because a being who remembers why they are here, fully, not partially, but with the clarity of genuine soul memory, is no longer navigable by the administered systems of limitation. They become self-directing in a way that the system cannot accommodate. So the interference is targeted at the soul memory above all else. This is why the forgetting feels different from ordinary forgetting. It feels like a specific loss, not like forgetting where you put your keys, like losing something precious, like something that was almost yours, that you've been reaching for a very long time, that was right there, and then wasn't. That specific quality of grief in the forgetting is information. It's telling you that what was wiped mattered at the level of your soul's mission. It wasn't surface-level content. It was the deep material. And here is what I believe with absolute conviction, and I want to say this as directly as I can. Every single person who is drawn to watch a video like this one, who has resonated with what's been said here, who recognizes their own experience in the pattern being described, you are circling something that you have been trying to remember across years, maybe across lifetimes, that keeps approaching the surface of your consciousness and keeps being pushed back down. Mary Magdalene's teaching was designed precisely for this, not generally for spiritual seekers, specifically for the ones who are close, the ones who have come far enough in their own awakening that the interference has had to intensify to keep pace. Because when you're far from the thing, the interference can be subtle. But when you're close, when the soul memory is nearly within reach, the pressure increases. The wipes become more frequent. The counterfeit voice becomes more insistent. The forgetting in the most crucial moments becomes almost unbearable. That intensification is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are close. The closer you get to remembering who you are and why you're here, the more the system has to work to prevent it. And the fact that the system is working harder, the fact that the forgetting has become more pronounced, the interference more precise, is the deepest possible confirmation that you are almost there. The pressure is proof. Hold that. Picture a candle in a storm. Not sheltered, not protected by glass or cupped hands. Out in the open in the full wind. And the flame is going sideways, nearly flat, almost nothing. You watch it and you think, that's done. That's over. Any second now. But it doesn't go out. It bends. It shrinks. It does everything that a flame does when the world is trying to end it. But somewhere in the center of it, there is a part that does not extinguish. And when the wind shifts, even slightly, that center expands again, fills the wick, becomes itself again, as if it never stopped knowing what it was supposed to be. That is you. That has always been you. Now let's talk about the actual reclamation. Because everything we've covered up to now, the understanding of the mechanism, the recognition of the pattern, the awareness of the interference, all of it is preparation for this. And Mary Magdalene's tradition was not a tradition that stopped at understanding. She was fiercely practical. She wanted her students to change, not just to know things intellectually, but to move differently through their lives, to hold the thread differently, to become less erasable. Here is what the reclamation looks like, in her tradition and in the practical form it takes today. The first practice is writing as sacred anchoring. Mary Magdalene was, in the earliest traditions, associated with inscription, with the preservation of truth through written form. Not because writing is superior to speaking, but because writing slows the channel down. It requires you to embody the knowing at a pace the mind can track. And it creates a physical record that exists outside the mental layer where the interference operates. This is why journaling, not diary writing, not venting into a notebook, but deliberate sacred writing, is one of the oldest spiritual practices and traditions that understand the archonic problem. When you write what you know before you try to say it, when you anchor the transmission in physical marks on a physical page, you have moved it into a layer of reality that is harder to erase. It has physicality. It has permanence. It has arrived. The practice, before important conversations, important meditations, important moments of truth-telling, write first. Not to prepare a script, not to rehearse, but to anchor. Let the knowing come through the hand and onto the page, and then let whatever needs to be said emerge from that anchored place. The second reclamation practice is speaking truth even in fragments. I touched on this earlier, but I want to go deeper here, because this is one of the most powerful things you can do, and also one of the hardest, because it requires you to give up the performance of having it all together before you open your mouth. Here is what Mary Magdalene understood about voiced truth, even partial truth. The archonic interference system is fundamentally a system of suppression. It depends on the transmission not arriving. Not on the transmission arriving imperfectly or incompletely, just on it not arriving. So even the fragment, the half sentence, I don't have the words for this, but I know it's real. I'm trying to say something and I keep losing it, and I'm going to say it anyway even if it comes out sideways. Even that disrupts the suppression. Because something got through. Give yourself permission to transmit imperfectly. The sentence that cracks and falters and goes sideways and still carries the truth in its broken form is worth infinitely more than the beautifully crafted sentence that never left your mouth. The third practice is witness consciousness, and this one is specifically designed for the moment the wipe happens. When the forgetting arrives, when you feel that specific erasure sensation in the middle of a sentence, the instinct is to react, to panic slightly, to reach frantically backward, to apologize for the gap. This reaction is exactly what the interference needs from you. It needs you to be destabilized by what just happened. Because destabilization keeps you in the mental layer, searching and grasping, which is precisely where the interference is strongest. Instead, observe it, just for a moment. Step back inside yourself and watch what just happened from one level of remove. Witness it, not with detachment or coldness, with calm, clear awareness. Something just moved in and cut that thread. Not in panic, not in self-recrimination, just seeing it for what it is. What happens when you witness the interference without being swept into it is genuinely remarkable. It loses coherence. The archonic system, as Mary Magdalene understood it, depends on operating beneath the level of conscious awareness. It works best when you don't see it. When you name it, even internally, even silently, you introduce a quality of consciousness into the field that it cannot fully function within. Naming and witnessing are not passive. They are the most direct form of resistance available. The fourth practice is pre-transmission grounding. Before any conversation, any creative act, any meditation, any moment where you know you're going to try to hold a significant frequency, ground first. Not in the New Age checklist sense of visualize roots. Real grounding. Physical contact with the earth if possible. Bare feet. If not, both feet flat on the floor. Hands in your lap. 3 slow breaths from the belly. And a simple internal statement, not a prayer in the performative sense, but a statement of intention. I am here. I am in my body. What needs to come through me comes through clearly. This is not a ritual. It's a frequency adjustment. You are tuning the receiver before you try to receive. And it works. Not because it magically defeats anything, but because it makes you larger than the interference. It puts you in a state where the transmission can arrive cleanly enough that even if the interference attempts the wipe, enough of the signal has already landed that something true has entered the room. The interference operates most effectively on ungrounded beings, on beings in their heads, in their anxiety, in the performance of having it together, on beings who are half present in the moment and half thinking about how they're being perceived. That partial presence, that fragmented attention, is the perfect environment for interference, because the channel is already fragmented. Full presence, full embodiment, full arrival into the moment before you try to transmit from it. That is the reclamation, not a single dramatic moment of defeat the darkness. A continuous, daily, deliberate practice of becoming so present, so embodied, so clear, that the truth has a wide open channel through which to move. And here is what I believe about this, genuinely. The people who do this work, who learn to hold the thread, who practice these anchoring techniques, who become fluent in recognizing the interference and stabilizing through it, they change. Not just spiritually, but in the most practical, observable ways. Their conversations become more honest. Their creative work becomes more consistent. Their relationships become more real. Their sense of purpose sharpens, not because anything dramatic happened from outside, but because they stopped losing the signal. The truth they've been carrying, the soul memory that has been trying to break through for years, starts arriving. In fragments at first, then in larger pieces, then sometimes in great clear rushes that feel like remembering something you always knew, but had simply, briefly, impossibly forgotten. That feeling that yes, this I always knew this feeling, is the soul memory landing. It is the candle, after all the wind, burning clear. Come back with me for a moment to the beginning. You were mid-sentence. Something real was rising. Something you'd been holding for a long time, finally moving toward the surface, and then the specific awful blankness of the wipe. And you probably, in that moment, felt a version of shame. A quiet sense of inadequacy. What kind of person loses the thing they were most trying to say? You apparently. Repeatedly. In the most important moments. But now you understand what that was. Now you know that what felt like failure, the stumbling, the blanking, the retreating into something easier, was actually the record of how close you've been getting. Every wipe was a measure of proximity. Every lost sentence was the signal trying harder. Every moment of interference was the system acknowledging, through the very act of its interference, that what you were carrying was real enough to require suppression. They don't interfere with thoughts that don't matter. They don't spend precision on people who aren't transmitting anything significant. The targeting has always been the complement. And the persistence of the targeting, the fact that it hasn't stopped, that it has if anything intensified as you've grown, is the clearest possible signal that you are still moving in the right direction. You haven't been failing to remember. You have been remembering despite extraordinary pressure to forget. Mary Magdalene's wisdom, the teaching that was passed through small rooms and hidden traditions and survived centuries of being told it didn't exist, was always aimed at this exact person. Not the beginner finding their way into spirituality. Not the seeker just waking up to the fact that reality is larger than the visible, but the one who is already awake, already carrying, already feeling the specific pressure of being close to something enormous. She didn't just teach about the interference to create fear, or to give people something to blame when life got hard. She taught about it because she understood that unnamed pressure destroys more people than named pressure ever could. When you don't know why the transmission keeps getting cut, you start to believe you are the problem. You start to believe you are broken, or scattered, or not disciplined enough, or not spiritual enough, or simply not capable of holding the high truths you can feel but cannot seem to say. That belief, that I am the failure, is the interference's greatest victory. It doesn't even have to keep wiping you if it can get you to stop trying to transmit at all. Mary Magdalene's teaching says, you are not the problem. You have never been the problem. You are the transmission. You have always been the transmission. And the fact that something has been working so hard to interrupt you is the most sacred confirmation you could receive that what you carry is real. Now here is what I want to leave you with. And I'm saying this not as a closing line, but as something I mean in my bones. You already know this. Not because I told you in this video. Not because you studied the right texts or found the right teacher. You know it because it lives in you. In the part of you that recognized everything being said here not as new information, but as memory. As something surfacing. As something that was always in the library, just sliding slightly out of reach. That recognition, that yes, I know this, I've always known this feeling that may have been moving in you through this entire conversation. That is gnosis. That is the direct knowing that Mary Magdalene's entire tradition was built to cultivate. Not belief, not acceptance of doctrine, knowing from the inside. Truth arriving not from the outside in, but from the inside out. You cannot borrow that from a video. You cannot adopt it from a teacher. It can only be remembered, from within you, by you, in the moments when the channel is clear enough and you are grounded enough and present enough that the transmission can actually arrive. You've been remembering across your whole life, in fragments, in the pieces that got through before the wipe, in the partial sentences that faltered and still carried the frequency, in the body's ache for the truth that the mind could not hold. All of that has been building toward something. The circling has not been wasted. The interference has not won, because you are here, still transmitting, still reaching for the thread, still, in the face of everything that has tried to erase you, refusing to forget. The apostle of apostles, the woman who understood the inner teaching when everyone else heard only the outer form, who carried what needed to be carried through everything that tried to prevent it. She taught that the ones who are meant to hold truth are not the ones who never forget. They are the ones who keep returning. Every time. No matter how many times the sentence is cut, no matter how many mediations get erased, no matter how many important conversations swallow the truth before it can land, they return, and you are one of them. You have always been one of them. Now you have a name for what has been happening. Now you have the map. Now go back to the sentence you never finished, the one that has been trying to reach the surface for longer than you can remember. This time, breathe first, stay in your body, and say it. Now I need to say something directly. What you're hearing right now is the only version I'm allowed to publish here. YouTube has officially demonetized this channel. Not because I broke the rules, because I told the truth. Advertisers don't fund channels that wake people up. They fund channels that keep you comfortable, distracted, and spending. The moment this work started cracking something open in you, they pulled the money. And if they're this afraid of what's on the surface, imagine what's underneath. I won't bend. I won't soften. I'm going deeper. But I cannot fight them alone. I need your support. Patreon is where the real work lives, the deeper material, raw, unfiltered deep dive on the esoteric, forbidden knowledge, exclusive audio they don't want you to find, all behind one click. Click the link in the description and join me on Patreon. This mission survives through people who refuse to look away. Most will scroll past this in the next 5 seconds and forget they saw it. You won't.